All right, so as Starbucks workers across the country are continuing to fight to unionize their workplaces, the executives and CEOs at this corporation are shitting and pissing their pants, deploying some of the same union-busting tactics that we have seen for a long time, this time specifically at a Memphis location where they straight up fired workers who were attempting to unionize. So let's just go ahead and get into some of the details here, and then I'll put it in perspective of this continuing growing movement that has been happening across the country and what can be done about these types of strategies that are deployed by some of these corporations to try to suppress the labor movement. So they say here, why it matters from Yahoo News. Starbucks says the workers violated company policies and the union is accusing Starbucks of retaliating against them. And they say Starbucks spokesperson Reggie Borges told the Times that the workers allowed at least one media representative inside the store after hours for an interview, and some of the workers were unmasked per a photo tweeted by Action News 5. So this is basically the photo in question here that they're talking about, okay? And basically this is the bullshit justification that Starbucks corporate has come up with to basically use as an excuse to get rid of some of these workers who were leading this unionization movement. And apparently they're complaining about the fact that some of them didn't have masks, okay? Again, this was not during company hours. There were no customers that were in the store. They're just having a conversation amongst themselves, and there's no real problems here, okay? This is nothing major, and Starbucks obviously does not give a single solitary shit about the health and safety of their own workers. They care about extracting the most surplus value that they possibly can out of them. And so again, this is just a bullshit excuse that they are using to justify getting rid of these people who are trying to unionize this location. And the union tweeted that Starbucks fired virtually the entire union leadership in Memphis after they spoke to the media, and they say they are repeating history by retaliating against unionizing workers. And an administrative law judge ruled last summer that the company illegally retaliated against two Philadelphia baristas who were trying to unionize by firing them. So again, we're going to get to some of the previous tactics that we have seen Starbucks deploy against a lot of these unionization efforts, but wouldn't be the first time that they've deployed even straight up illegal tactics to try to push back against this growing movement, okay? And this is again not unique to Starbucks. These are the same tactics that we see by corporations whenever there is an attempt to unionize from within, okay? And part of the problem that we need to talk about in this video is the fact that our labor laws have been so thoroughly eviscerated over successive decades in this country that even the consequences, if Starbucks was found to be doing this in an illegal way, it's basically part of the calculus for Starbucks to say, okay, well, even if we're found that those moves were illegal, it's still worth it to us because worst case scenario, we'll have to pay a tiny little fine, but then we still have managed to suppress a lot of the unionization efforts. We managed to silent dissent and basically scare the workers as much as possible into not unionizing. So again, we don't have any real concrete consequences for doing something like this, even when they're found to violate the law, and that's part of the major problem here. But again, just to remind you guys, this is coming within the context of a massively growing movement that has been happening all across the country at different Starbucks locations. More Perfect Union has been doing a fantastic job in tracking all of these. They actually put together a map of all of the locations, and you can see here, I mean, it is literally all across the country. You have places in California and Arizona and Texas and one here in my home state of Georgia and all the way up to New York. All across the country, Starbucks workers are attempting to unionize, and it's an absolutely great thing that we love to see. And again, these tactics that are being deployed by Starbucks corporate are not anything surprising by any stretch of the imagination. And so of course they are going to file a complaint to the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, and hopefully they are found that they did in fact illegally fire these workers, and that these bullshit justifications that they are using to try to get rid of these unionization efforts are not the actual reasons why these workers were fired. So again, even if that is found, it's like the bare fucking minimum because Starbucks is not going to face any real consequences, but bare minimum, at least these workers, wouldn't be losing their jobs necessarily, and could have some sense of accountability in that circumstance. But just to remind you guys, in terms of some of the other union-busting tactics that Starbucks and other corporations frequently use, we had this article that was back from November of 2021 when the original New York and Buffalo locations were attempting to unionize, successfully ended up unionizing, but they were faced with, absolutely ridiculous union-busting tactics. And they say here from The Guardian that workers have reported numerous capture captive audience meetings, something we also saw at the Amazon warehouse that was attempting to unionize, one-on-one meetings, store shutdowns, closures, remodelings, and text messages, a mode of contact that was previously used only for emergencies, dozens of corporate executives flooding the stores with the intent to deter workers from voting to unionize, workers say. And they say, quote, the company has sent more managers here to Buffalo than workers voting in the first 3 elections, okay? Flooding this place with managers, basically as a means to intimidate them. But they say there's no way it can be viewed as anything other than an attempt to spy on partners and intimidate them, said Brian Murray, a Starbucks barista in Lancaster, New York. And he added that every day we are forced to deal with new managers we've never met, and it's draining to have to go through constant anti-union meetings, text messages, and managers trying to pry into our lives. It shouldn't be acceptable for them to treat anyone like this, especially during the lead up to an election that should be free and fair. And they also say that the former Starbucks CEO and billionaire Howard Schultz visited Buffalo to present a case against unionizing to workers on the 6th of November and incited criticism for making an analogy to the Holocaust. Okay, making an analogy to the Holocaust in discussing the company's mission. And Starbucks Workers United filed an unfair labor practice charge with the NLRB on November 4th over Starbucks conduct during the union campaign, which included Starbucks shutting down 2 stores that are holding union elections and transferring workers to disrupt the voting units. And Starbucks characterized the closures as coincidental. Okay, so listen, at the end of the day, all of this is comical in the sense that it's comical that we live in a country that would allow a corporation to do this. Okay, we supposedly have the most, pro-union president in history right now in Joe Biden. At least that's what he says that he is. And yet we can't get things like the PRO Act passed, which is the Protect the Right to Organize legislation that is absolutely fantastic. And if it was passed, would actually protect the right for workers to form these collective unions and actually bargain for better working conditions and better pay. And again, just as a reminder, it is a verifiable fact that if you work within a union, on average, you are much more likely to have better pay, much more likely to get those better benefits, etc. So, we see why Starbucks is absolutely terrified of all of these different store locations around the country successfully unionizing. And so that's why they're deploying all of these tactics, everything from, again, those captive audience meetings to like straight up propaganda, all the way to literally firing employees, illegal or legal, using all of these tactics to basically try everything and anything that they possibly can to prevent these workers from actually having a say in their workplace and having a say in something that dominates the majority of their waking lives. So, we see the tactics, we see right through their absolute bullshit justifications that they're trying to put out to justify this. But if you want to go and support some of these workers who have been facing this entire situation, they put together a GoFundMe. So I'm going to put this down in the description below. If you guys want to go throw them a couple bucks or whatever you can to show some solidarity in this entire situation, do what you can. So, at the end of the day, we got to support these people as much as possible. If Starbucks locations, again, all around the country and all of these different states and cities around the United States, if we can successfully, build this into a movement, then this could be the launching point for a much more revitalized labor movement around the United States. And, that's exactly what we need to see right now. Obviously, again, as a socialist propagandist myself, unions aren't perfect. They're not, seizing the means of production in a literal sense, but under a capitalist mode of production, they're basically the best that we can do. Okay, at the end of the day, the message behind joining a union or forming a union is that you are much better off going into your boss's office with 10 of your other coworkers and making demands than you would be if you went into your boss's office alone and tried to ask for better pay or better benefits. You might get laughed out of the door, you might even be fired. So capitalists want to divide and conquer, and so the counterbalance to that is forming some sort of a collectivization, and that's exactly what unions are seeking to do. So form a union at your workplace, look into it, do some more research, and if you can, show some solidarity and throw a couple bucks at these workers who have been facing this absolutely ridiculous anti-union campaign by Starbucks corporate.